Hi, I'm Elaine Gilmore, and this is a continuation of my videos on how to mount a quilt, and I'm using my Handy Quilter Avanti frame in my shop. I'm located in Bunnell, Florida, and we sell quilting machines. I'm an avid machine quilter. I love computerized quilting. It's my favorite. But right now, this video is going to focus on how to mount your batting and your quilt top. I use a float method, so I don't use my second bar, which is the bar you would pin your quilt top to. In fact, I have removed that leader, I have cut it in half, I have hemmed it, and I use it for wall hanging sizes. And as you can see, I don't have a full-size leader on my table right now. I have what was once 1 liter made into a small set for wall hangings. The first thing I do after I have mounted my back, and if you want to see how I do that, please watch the first 2 videos in this series. I'm now going to take my belly bar, and again, just to go over it for those who aren't familiar with their bars. The first bar is your belly bar. This is the bar I mount the foot of my backing to roll it up. This bar is my second bar, not belly bar, but my top bar, and it's the bar you mount your top to. The bar down here is an idle bar, and what it does is it controls your quilt as you advance it and keeps it smooth, and it keeps it in the proper place. And the final bar up top, which has your back leader on, is your take-up roller. And it's often referred to in the quilting world as your TUR. So if you're on any lists and you see the word TUR, the capital letters TUR, this is what they're referring to, your take-up roller. Okay, so in order to insert my batting, I could try and shove it under here. I could loosen up my quilt top and lay it down. But I actually like to just take my bars, pop them out, and move them to the back, because I don't want to have to continually do this. So I pop out the bars and I place them toward the back, just like that. Now I can take my batting, and I have plenty of space in which to place it down. I am not a person who marks a center on a quilt and works from that center. I eyeball it. If I can place my quilt, my batting and my quilt top, pretty much evenly across my work area, that's good enough for me. If you want to take the time to mark your leaders for the direct center and always pin exactly there and find your center in your quilt backings and your quilt tops, that's fine. It's really whatever you like. There's no rules. The quilt we're going to place on here today is a quilt that came from eBay. So I thought it would be a good choice simply because they are never exactly square or smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to center it on my batting. Now I've placed my batting almost to the top, which you will see as I advance a little bit, and I'm laying out my quilt top. The first thing I want to do is make sure I'm sort of centered. And again, I'm not measuring any centers. Then I want to make sure that my quilt is indeed set on straight. What set on straight means to me is when I look at a quilt, that I look for the center of that quilt. That's where my eye automatically goes. If that appears to be square to me, that's okay. Borders are hardly ever square. So I take my quilt and I will fold it down to the seam line of all my borders and sashings. And that's the mark I want to make square or straight on my quilt. Straight for me may not be straight for you. I tend to use my eye, but if you have a pro stitcher, you can use your pro stitcher. by locking it in place and checking to see if you're straight with a straight channel lock, or you can use your eye. I tend to use my eye. I will lay it out, and then I'm going to go to the end of my quilting table, and I'm just going to look at it. And if it appears to be pretty straight, I'm going to go with it. I have what appears to my eye to be just a little low there, so I'm just going to adjust that. Now, this part, I'm going to simply leave it be for this moment. I don't want to mess with it too much because I want a straight line there. I'm going to take my second bar, which we would have pinned a top to if we had been pinning, and pop it back in place. Now this bar applies some tension to my quilt and helps me in the quilting process. When you quilt, you will find that your quilting tends to draw your quilt up a little bit. So I like to place a couple of pins right here so it doesn't creep. But before I do that, now that I have this part straight, I need to just gently put the sashing and border in place. Again, I'm not doing a lot of this because my quilt is probably not all that square. I want to go ahead, bring my machine over, and I should take this off of Pro Stitcher because it's on Pro Stitcher and we're going to use it manually right now. So I'm just going to release the Pro Stitcher. And I have in my bobbin a Magna Glide from Quilt, in I believe it's white, and the top is Affinity, which is a variegated blue poly thread. I'm going to come to about center. I want to be in a basting stitch, so I'm going to lower my stitches to 4. And using my hopping foot, I'm going to eyeball and keep my baseline within that 1/4 inch of the back of my quilt. I have pulled up my bobbin thread, and now you can tack it down manually by holding in and just taking a few stitches, or you can just go back and forth, however, whatever is your favorite tacking method. Now I'm going to go ahead and start the machine, and I'm going to move left. I use my fingers, and I want to stay up toward that edge. If I jump down a little bit, I don't worry about it. It's a basting stitch. I can pull that part out. And I'm going to go along to my left from center out. And if you can tell, this is a little bit puffy. So if I get to an area that will be too puffy, what I'll do is I'll bring my needle up, I'll move it over a little bit, and stick some of that puffiness back there, and now work back using my finger to just ever so gently put tension on it and work that fullness in. All quilts are going to have some fullness. It's just the nature of the game. It's something we battle with. As a long arm quilter who didn't piece before she became a long arm quilter, I learned to be a very good piecer. It was a good learning experience for me. So when I get to my edge, I go off the quilt and I come back on. I go about maybe an inch off. And let me set myself a needle down so that we'll stop that way. Okay. Now, I want to also keep my quilt as square as I can. So now I'm just going to gently smooth and make sure that I'm square. I'm going to stick one pin right there, and I've pulled that tip so I don't hit the pin when I'm sewing. Now, again, I take my fingers and I put them into like a C positioning so that I can apply tension back and tension forward, like a rocking motion, to adjust for the fullness in the quilt. Now I'm going to actually come forward, and most of my pressure is on my back finger with my thumb just keeping the fabric of the quilt top down. When I get a little bit down, I'm going to gently square this out, and you can use your eye. If you don't trust your eye, take a piece of blue painter's tape, make a strip down here, put it on, and follow it. I actually have known people who use painter's tape to baste with. I don't care for it myself, but you know what? That doesn't mean it's wrong. If it works for you, use it. Now when I get down here, I'm just going to come as far down as I can, and then I just back up a couple of stitches to anchor that in. I don't want to make a huge big knot. I just want enough stitches to hold it in place. I'm going to bring my machine backwards, take a single stitch, bring up my bobbin thread, and cut. A word about scissors. I keep my scissors on a scissor chain, and I do not hang them from my neck. All my shirts have holes in them from hanging my scissors at my neck, so I don't do it anymore. I removed this pin. I'm going to bring this pin over here because this is where it's going to go next. Now I'm at this side, so I just want to gently, and again, if there's fullness here, I'm not taking it and smoothing it, pushing it to the side, because if I do that, I'm going to make it, my quilt top, all askew, and I want to keep my quilt top as square as I possibly can. Pick up my thread, take a couple of stitches to put it in place, and then using my fingers, I will again apply pressure using my middle finger and pushing down to kind of keep that fabric from skirting off to one side or another. Now I'm getting to a spot here where I could possibly start to run into some fullness. So I want to really make sure that I push down using the throat of the machine to my advantage, and then here I can see some fullness. I'm going to raise my needle up, and I'm going to move over here, and I'm really actually dragging a line of thread. Now right here, I'm going to open up, start up, and go backwards and work that ease in, or ease that fabric in. That was a tongue twister. And then I'm just going to work it over here. Here's a good thing to look at. Not a very square quilt. Well, if you quilt for hire, you're going to get a lot of that. If you're not a great piecer, you're going to get a lot of that. As I said, long arm quilting turned me into a good piecer. And these are the reasons why. So now I'm going to take my pin, and if you notice, I have not completed that corner. I'm going to take my pin, and I'm going to adjust my side ever so gently, because I want to see where this is off, and so I can keep it as square as I can. I've put this pin in. I'm going to turn my machine on, and again, just ever so gently work in this corner. Go off about an inch, coming back. Now we're going to work in the side. And in this part, I might just give a little help with my fingers, and then my one pin. If you use a pin, and you know pins are a big no-no in long arm quilting, please, please make sure the tip of that pin is not going to be in your needle way, because you can and will break a needle and possibly throw your machine out of time. Then you're going to be looking for your sales rep, and they're not going to be happy with you. All right, here we go. Got a big puff here. I'm going to lift up my needle, and I'm going to come past the puff of fabric. Or you can call it bolt, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to just work that in, like so. So without taking a pleat, I've been able to work that in.